Okay, so I'm going to call to order and ask for a minute taker.
I've got them started.
You do? Okay, great. Thank you, Don. Okay, so for the folks that are here, it's good to see everyone. It feels like it's been a while. It has been a while since we've had a meeting. And we'll start out with public comment, but before we do, we're just going to ask folks to refrain from using the chat feature because that is not accessible to people who view the recording, and it encourages conversations that don't happen within the meeting, and so that can be problematic with public meeting law, open meeting law. So yeah, so I don't know. Hi, Herb. I don't know if you're our only non-committee visitor at this time, but if you or anyone else would like to say anything, feel free. I think you're muted. Oh, there you go.
Okay, there we go.
There you
I'm
go.
not very adept at this stuff. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'll be pretty brief. As you know, I really think it's important to get some good financial information before the board, before they make a decision around, potentially closing schools. And I'm just really worried that that's not going to happen. But so that's kind of my key issue right now. But Dave Sharp said something at the last board meeting that I thought was important. So when I was talking about, well, you got to look at, what the budget gap is, what the net savings are, and geez, are there other ways that you can try to save some money? That was, looking at programs. And I think Dave's point was really good, which is before you start willy-nilly looking at programs and how you might be able to trim some stuff, which I think is important to look at, you really need to talk about, well, what do we need as a school system? And so what he was talking about was a program feasibility committee, really sort of in coordination with a facilities. I mean, facilities isn't the only issue. I mean, programs are really important. For example, do you need a nurse? Do you need a nurse in every school or not? I don't know whether nurses are in every school or counselors, things like in elementary schools. Mundane, how many gyms do you need for the elementary school kids? I don't know, but it's probably important. And if you close, a bunch of elementary schools, you don't have gym space, for those that's important. And, probably, a core issue really around this decision to close schools. I'm hearing some comments from people on the board. Well, geez, we really should be moving kids from elementary schools to high school sooner. And, they have some reason that, I think other people would say, geez, it's not bad to have, a pre-K through 8 program. But that's a kind of an important decision to think about, an important consideration to think about before you decide to close schools. So, the notion of having a program feasibility committee along with the facilities feasibility committee, I thought was a good one. Final comment. I know you've probably got a lot to do. I saw that you were thinking about ranking core educational values. And I can appreciate that, but it really depends on what decision you're making. If you're making a decision about, what are you going to do with the curriculum, something near and dear to my heart. Well, the values are important, but you might look at those values differently than if you're thinking about closing schools. So when you're trying to rank educational values in a vacuum. I just don't, I don't know how that works. So that's about it. You got a long agenda. Good luck to you.
Sir, thanks for
okay.
continuing to show up and sharing your thoughts with us. And
Okay.
I did pass your letter on to the full committee as well.
Okay, thank you, Krista.
Yep. And we'll check in again.
I'm gonna just bug off, have some dinner
Okay.
or something with my wife.
Okay. Enjoy. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Is there, and the rest of us are committee members, but if there's any other, sort of public comment people want to make before we dive in. Okay. Okay, so we'll start with approval of the minutes.
Krista, this is Rob.
Oh, hey, Rob.
Am I able to make public comment even though I'm on the committee? I don't know. I've never tried.
Yeah, maybe I'll ask Dawn that question. I put that out there, but yeah, what do you think, Dawn? I mean,
So-
if it pertains to anything on the agenda, I would say hold it until then.
Right. But if he wants to make a statement, like as a community member,
Mhm.
if we were at a board meeting, I would ask that he get up from the board table and move physically to the other position, just because it gets confusing for people to understand when it's somebody's personal opinion as opposed to a statement of the board kind of thing. And, we always say when you sit at the table, you're doing the board work. So in my mind, that's always been, if you can make a comment as a community member, but you should do it from the other side of the table.
Great. Well, I'll take this opportunity then as a member of the public. Dawn, I've emailed you a couple thoughts on this, but I tried to hop on the feasibility study committee meeting last week, and I was concerned about the format of that meeting because it was the first time I wasn't necessarily like at the table and or in the room of a webinar. And it just felt like if it was a real meeting when we were in person, we'd all be in that same room. And the committee members could see the participants could see each other, the participants could see themselves in that room. And when you're blocked out from actually seeing yourself, I think on the screen, it's really hard to feel like you're actually participating in the process. And to me, it sounded like we were all in the same room, but 5 people were on one side of the wall and their voices were being piped through that wall to the quote unquote participants on the other side. And in considering we're the community engagement committee, or this is our meeting for that, I think we need to be really thoughtful about that moving forward, because it really did not feel like I was actually at the meeting, and it felt like things were happening in a vacuum. And as we continue to have really challenging conversations and really challenging decisions being made, I just want us to be thoughtful about that. We had town halls where you could scroll left and right and see everyone that was a participant, not all at once, just with the size of screens. But I just want us to be thoughtful moving forward that we just let everyone be at the table. We can mute them. That doesn't mean that they can interrupt or speak, but at least that so we could see them being present. That's just my one public comment.
Thank you. Nancy?
I wasn't planning to speak on this tonight, but I'd just like to echo what Rob is saying. I had the same experience. I think it was at a board meeting where people who weren't on the board, were not, their faces weren't shown. And it was hard to feel that our presence was welcomed. And so I don't know why that happened, but I hope it doesn't have to keep happening, because it's sort of counter to what we're trying to do as a committee.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, I'm not sure we have an answer on or approach on that right now, but I know using Zoom is kind of well, I guess we're 6 or so months in, but you know, it is good to keep thinking about how best to make sure we're using that platform. Okay, so if there's no other general comment right now, I'd like to ask a board member if they could make a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was way back on September 29th.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Okay, and can I have a second?
Rob Backlund will second.
Okay, so all those in favor of approving the minutes from September 29th, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so the minutes are approved. Thank you. All right, so it has been a while. We've been busy in between our meetings, and folks have been participating in a lot of the things we've been doing outside of our time together. And thank you for all of the behind the scenes work to make those things happen, and for showing up at the different committee meetings, board meetings, and community engagement events. I thought, since this is the first time we're here together again in a while, that it would be good first to just remind everyone of the group norms that we established at our last meeting. And let's keep those in mind as we go through the agenda. Then I'll check in at the end to see if we feel like we did pretty well observing those norms. And then I wanted to take a few minutes to kind of revisit where we are. Some things have gotten moved around in our timing since, I believe, since we were all together at the end of September. So I just thought it would be good to take a few minutes to revisit that. And I want to apologize that the links in the agenda to the facilities planning timeline in particular, I think is the old timeline that doesn't include those updates. And so I'm going to share my screen so that folks that are, I'm not going to put it in the chat, I'm just going to share the screen. The minutes that are being taken now will have all of the updated links. So I use a template that I just kind of copy and paste moving forward. And so that and our fall engagement plan hadn't been updated. So apologies. And if you will give me a second, I'm going to show you my screen. So we can just take a minute to look at where we are with the planning timeline. Okay, so can everybody see that okay? Okay. So really what's most changed is the timing of the survey and spelling out the engagement around that. But I'll just start with the second column here. So the Facilities Feasibility Committee is continuing to do their work, and I believe that's going to conclude on the 18th. I was hoping Kevin would be here this evening to give us an update on that. I'm not sure if he'll be joining us later, but it's my understanding, and John, you may maybe know as well and can correct me if I'm wrong, that they are have been working through their essential questions. Their last meeting was, I think, probably 4 hours long. They went for quite a while going through some of those questions, and they are, I think, hoping to wrap up their work and write up a summary. I think their final meeting is on the 18th. And so after that, they'll be sharing it with Patrick. And Patrick will be using that information and the engagement work and the data that he and his team have and the NASDAQ information to present several options to the board at a special meeting, which is now, we have a set date for December 7th. And so that we're all clear, Patrick's going to present several different options, and he's going to make a recommendation to the board of which one he thinks, based on his experience, we should consider putting before the community for a vote. So similar to when he presents a budget, he will say oftentimes, you know, this is what it would look like if we had this percentage increase. This is what it would look like if we had this percentage increase. And this is the one that I recommend that the board commit to. And then we hash through that, and we usually don't decide whether we're going to take that recommendation or not until the following meeting. But we ask lots of questions and we gather information, and then we sometimes agree with his recommendation and sometimes we don't. So what's going to happen after that December meeting is that the board is going to figure out the best ways to get additional information to help us determine whether we want to put forth to the community whatever Patrick's recommendation is. And so this committee has a big role to play in the community engagement that happens after that time. And so I think it's our job to make sure we provide robust opportunities for people to ask questions about, digest, understand these different options, and then provide input on them. And I think some input, well, I shouldn't say I think, I'll back up and say it may be that the input comes during some of those community engagements. It may be that it comes only in the way of the survey, but for sure we're going to be getting input on a survey that will follow after that, after we've engaged with the community. So ideally, the survey would close in mid-January, which would give us about 2 weeks to analyze all of that data and then present that to the board. And we have a meeting on January 26th, and that timing is the window in which, should we decide to put something on the ballot, it has to be warned during, by that time. So I just wanted to make sure we were all clear on what our process is looking like now, which again is a little bit different because of changing the timing of the survey. So I just want to pause for a second and see if anybody has any questions about that. And I can only see a few hands at a time. So I see Nancy, and then if I don't, so go ahead, Nancy, and if I don't see you, you can unmute yourself after her.
I'm wondering in the timeline, when is the board going to be deciding on the budget to warn, the FY22 budget also to warn on January 26th, or are they going to be doing it before then?
Maybe you can help me, Don. I think that anything we warn would probably happen on the 26th, but I don't know.
If I could, I think we're gonna have as usual a budget information meeting in December and then in January. And then what's the date the budget has to be?
By the end of January, we have to
Yeah.
have a budget
Right.
warrant because you have to go 40 days back from town meeting day in order
Yeah,
to
it's the
properly
same.
warn it.
Right, it's the same time frame. This January 26th date is the last date probably that we could warn anything. So I assume it's the budget and anything else, if there is anything else to be warned. We will have another board meeting during, after the special meeting in December. We'll have another board, we'll have a regular board meeting, and we'll probably be talking more about the budget then, as well as at our November board meeting.
And will you be talking about the options also then at that other December board meeting?
I don't know. I mean, I guess the idea is that we would be engaging with the community and doing the survey before we have much more discussion about it.
I think, Krista, that we're going to have to do our regular work on top of this extra community work at the same time. So we're going to be pushing to get a lot done because it all has that same deadline. We can't make one decision without the other, or, we can't say, yeah, okay, here we're going to put the budget ahead and then make the decision on if we're going to put options out there because of that warning date.
I'm looking to see if there are any other hands up, and I see a couple of new folks here. I see Sue White and Sally, which is great. Sally Ober. So if any committee members have any comments, and then anybody else who's joining us will come to you during another visitor's business toward the end of the meeting.
I have a quick question. The community engagement, are we going to talk about what that's going to be tonight?
Yes, so that is on the
Okay.
agenda
Okay,
to begin really fleshing that out.
okay.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen because it really makes it hard for me to see if anybody else has any comments. I do see okay, I see a note in the chat, and so I just want to let folks that are just joining know that we're trying not to use the chat feature at all because of open meeting law and trying to be fully transparent for folks that can't see that. But it sounds like maybe we had the wrong link in Front Porch Forum. So thanks for bringing that up, Sue. And I'll see if I can figure out why that happened.
Well, it was Rob's link and it probably had been updated. The message I got was that it was in the author's trash. And then I went to the website and the website didn't have the link. And then I went to your Facebook page and that link to the website wasn't there either. So there's just some tech updates that need to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, so all of the meeting links are correct on the MAUSD board calendar. And you have to scroll down. It's a little hard to find, but if you scroll down and you look under the date, you should
It wasn't
see
right.
Okay.
I finally remembered that they were embedded in the agenda.
Okay.
And I think that's a trick that, that's a little bit of a goose chase. And I'm glad to be here. It's nice to see you all. Thanks for having me. I don't need to talk about it anymore.
Yeah. Okay. 7.5. So I'm just looking at the 757. So not just split hairs, Sue, and I'm really glad you're bringing this up because if there's a wrong link anywhere, that's a problem. But I do see on the school board calendar this meeting with the same link that's on the agenda. So maybe we can talk after about making sure we're looking at the right places. But yeah, we need to make sure we're on the same page with being where we need to be because that's really frustrating for folks. So I'm sorry that it took you so long to figure out where to be. Okay, so I think we'll move on to the update about the select board meetings. And I know that Don and Kristen, I believe, were at the Moncton one that was yesterday. I was just going to share with folks that may or may not know, there have been, let's see, 2 so far, Starksboro and Moncton. New Haven is tonight, which is why Patrick isn't joining us. Lincoln is later this week, and I think Bristol is happening soon as well. So Patrick is reaching out to either full select boards if he's able to get on their calendar or some combination of folks that are able at a different time to connect with, to just talk with them about the role of their school in their community, whether folks have thought about other possibilities for a school facility should that not be a school in the future. What are the community assets or what are the assets in a particular community? And from talking with Patrick, the 2 towns that he's met with so far had some similarities. A lot of folks talking about that school is really where you get to know people in your community, that once you bring your kids to school, that's oftentimes where you develop friendships and relationships that can continue on even when your kids are no longer at that school. That the school building is the most or only appropriate place to have community meetings and gatherings. And that for the 2 towns Patrick had met with before this evening, neither had thought much about possible uses for the facility if it was not occupied by a school. So those were a couple of the things that he mentioned to me that I wanted to share with you folks. And I don't know if Dawn or Kristen have anything to add from the Moncton meeting. Donna, I can't tell if you're talking, but if you
I-
are, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I was mute. I was typing minutes, and so I got a now long space bar in the minute. But they did talk about the need for childcare from sort of birth, toddler. They did talk for a while about that last night. That being a need in the community.
Did you want to add anything, Kristen, from last night's meeting in Moncton? And Nancy, I see your hands there. Just one sec. Nancy, I think you were at Starkspur as well, right? Did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I would say I sat in, I really didn't participate except when Patrick's internet blew out a couple of times from his house. But I would say that the two select board members who were there waxed quite eloquently about what the school means to the community and what the community means to kids. But my main takeaway when I left the meeting at the end was that the select board, those members started to contemplate the idea that Robinson School might be closed and the building might be sold or basically given back to the town, they were quite not adamant, but their immediate reaction was that the school, that the town didn't have the capacity to take the school building on. And that was really their main reaction to that when they got thinking about that in some detail at the meeting.
Thank you. Sarah, you had your hand up before.
Yeah, I'm just curious, is there going to be an opportunity for the board and the community to be briefed on those conversations that Patrick's having with select board members from each town?
Yeah, I think that the idea of having Patrick going to these groups now is to help him with his thinking before he makes his recommendation to the board. So I would imagine he'll reflect on those at that special board meeting. The other thing I wanted to say is just that I really appreciate that those conversations are happening. I think that this committee is a big reason why those conversations are happening. We had some great connections that we made this summer with select boards. And I hope that these aren't the only conversations we have with town leaders moving forward. I think they're really important conversations to have in terms of thinking about the vitality of our communities and the role of schools in those communities. Sally, your hand was up. Did you want to say anything?
Oh, I was just going to ask if those meetings were open to other people. I guess they are because Nancy was at one.
Yeah, they should be posted, and I'm not sure. I think that the select boards are the ones who are, because it's like their meeting, so they're doing whatever they do to post them and then inviting Patrick to attend. So yeah, anybody is welcome.
Just to be clear, the Starksboro meeting was only 2 select board members. It wasn't a regular select board meeting. And I just happened to ask the town, the person who is like, who works for the select board, when it was going to happen. And she checked with the select board, and then one of the 2 people who were attending with Patrick sent me the link. So that's how I happened to get it.
Hey, Deirdre. So typically we leave questions from visitors to the end, but go ahead and if you have a question or comment, and then we'll also come back to the end of the meeting.
Great. It's just kind of bouncing off of what you said, Krista, this idea of like dialogue in the community. And I know this is happening now, and it's been a long process that the Community Engagement Committee has been a part of. Like, it's a long journey, and And I'm just wondering, I know that there's been some really powerful letters that I've seen that have come to the board and come to the school, asking, I think, very poignant, powerful questions. And I just wonder what happens with those questions. You know, they feel like they're like what I wonder about is it's one thing to talk on Zoom and it's one thing to be at a board. All these things are important, but how will the board and administration sort of respond to those questions? Because I feel like a lot of those questions are the ones that I'm thinking about that I will ask and other people are asking. So I just wonder about that process when sort of really thoughtful letters are crafted and come to the board. How do we respond? How does the board want to respond, knowing that there's no one perfect way, but I'm just a little concerned that those are out there and they're floating, but there's not a clear engagement with those, especially some of those letters had multiple signatures on them.
John, would you like to talk about how we typically handle when we, what the process is for when we hear from community members outside of meetings? Hey, Darla, sorry, can I ask you, I'm going to mute you if you don't mind.
Sorry.
No problem.
So typically, if a letter comes to me, what I do is send a response. Sometimes when there are letters that are full of lots and lots of questions, and in the past we've done this where we sort of just gather the questions and then a group of us might work on a response. Sometimes it might come out in the form of some frequently asked questions that we answer, because it can take a lot of time to respond individually to people. And if multiple people are asking some of the same questions, it's helpful to just get the word out. I think we've done that in the past, Krista, with some of the community engagement stuff, when we notice that there's a theme of questions that we just work to get them in a frequently asked questions format and send them out.
I guess my question, just a follow-up, is has there been, thinking of 3 specific letters, has there been any response to the one that I know Cheryl Mitchell and Mike Fisher and Nancy put together, the one that Verb Olson did, and then I saw one recently by Devin McLeod. Have those questions been picked up? Do you know? And you don't have to have the answers, so I don't want to push that, but have those questions been wrestled with the board?
So I don't know about all, I don't think that I've seen all 3. I don't know. I know I've seen one from maybe 2 groups. So, and we have started in some side groups just discussing like how would you answer that question? How would you present enough information? But I have not seen all 3. So I'm a little lost about what this other one is about.
I'll just add that I think all of those letters that we've gotten pose questions and concerns that, in my mind, go into the hopper of things the board is thinking about and chewing on. And they are all part of this engagement process that will include lots of other voices as well. I know with Cheryl Mitchell's letter in particular, you know, we've started to have conversations about, you know, what are the opportunities to think about facilities, and if they were to be repurposed, what are the resources? And so there's a lot, so there's lots of stuff to chew on, but there's nothing to act on in this moment. It's kind of all part of the conversation. And I imagine that as we look at Patrick's recommendations, the board's going to have lots of questions that are going to come from things we've heard from the community, things that are our own questions that we're going to want answered. And we're all getting all of those letters. So we have our own things we want to know more about as well. So, but they also have to be balanced out with, again, a really wide range of input that we might hear from the community. Trying to think if there was anything else about the select board meeting. Oh, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that. I think that these conversations that with the select board that Patrick is having is really important. And as a board member and part of this committee, I, would like to hear a little more formally maybe what was discussed. And I also want to reiterate that our school district is not an island. There are multiple communities and towns in the state of Vermont that have lost their town schools in the recent history. And there are great town clerks, there are great select boards out there that I'm sure would be willing to share maybe hard and fast financial numbers, what that's looked like. What does it look like as far as, have folks left the community, have folks moved to the community? And I just want to reiterate, like, it's important to ask our towns, but there are also examples in our own state where we can look to see maybe what could happen. Just a thought. I know people's bandwidth is maxed out, and but when I go back to the ends, our ends, we recognize that we need to think about a cost deemed acceptable by the community. And I think sometimes people think that's just dollars. And I want to remind folks that cost, at least to me, I read that much more than just dollars and cents. And I'm sure there's examples out there that people can point. And people might say, well, it's in both directions as far as like, it didn't affect the community or it did. I feel like town clerks and select boards would have a much better sense of the numbers.
Mary?
Just responding to Deirdre, I'm wondering just, as someone who has, I don't know if you were part of the letters or you're just wondering about them, but what could be a way that you would feel heard? Because in this, especially in the digital world, like you throw stuff out and it's like, ooh, you don't know where it goes. So is there, I don't know, and as the community engagement committee, it might be something for us to think about, like, how do we have that feedback loop be closed, I guess. So just as a, someone who has done this and thrown it out to the universe and hasn't heard something back, what would be a way you could let us know?
Just to clarify, I wasn't part of those letters, just to, I actually read them as a receiver and thought those are great questions. So I think I'll just do this quick because I just want to, off the top of my head, my brainstorm is to really have those questions picked up directly. To say, I'm making it up. Here, there was 7 questions in those letters and we're picking up 3 tonight. So not keeping it big and broad. I think engagement there's been such an effort on this group to really engage the community. But I think at this point, we've got to drill down to the specifics. And I think we can't, and that's not just waiting for Patrick's December numbers. It's like, just taking those 2 or 3 questions, whatever we think seems like the important ones, and let's dive in and let's wrestle with it and let's hear diverging opinions on a Zoom call. I think that's what I'm worried about, is that we're not going to the specifics and we're not wrestling out loud with each other with the differing ideas. And that takes a lot of trust, but that would make me think people are picking them up in real time, not behind closed doors or in that way. Just a brainstorm. I can think about that question more, Mary. Thank you.
One thing I can imagine, so this group really probably wouldn't do the wrestling. It's the full board. This group's job is to make recommendations to the board about how to best engage with the community. So this committee might say, we recommend that the board contemplate these 3 questions. And then the board can decide whether or not to do that. So I think, we could be more deliberate about that, but it would be really important to have that at the full board table. Thank you, Deirdre. I appreciate your comments. Okay, I'm going to move us on. I don't see Kevin here, so he's not able to provide an update on what they've been working on. I know it was a very, very long meeting, but I don't feel equipped to share the highlights with you. And so we're going to have to kind of wait to hear more from them until the 18th. But I don't think that should inhibit our work right now as far as thinking about our engagement with the community. So I want to go to some updates from the 2 groups that are still working on different pieces of engagement. The first is the video shorts. So Kristen, can you just share with everybody where we are at with that? You need to mute still, Chris, or unmute.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I was feeding some teenagers and now they've left. Let's see. So yes, we have finished with video 1 and 2, obviously, and we will be doing number 3 after Patrick makes his recommendation, because that's also what the survey will address, I believe, right? And so it will be another, well, a little less than a month till we start working on that script, and to get that information out as transparently and thoroughly as possible, which is what we've been trying to do all along with all the information. Kim, do you have any other comment about it?
No, except I think it would be good to reshare those out. And is the timeline that you shared with us, Krista, is that on the MAUSD website? So
yes,
people know what the process is, because I did find that there was a lot of people. I listened into the Moncton meeting last night, and in talking to people here in New Haven, I was surprised how many people weren't aware of what was happening, and that this is the first time that they've heard that and there's always people that aren't going to be engaged for 2 years, and then all of a sudden we get to the end and people jump in, but we have to remember that we've been at this a long time, but there are a lot of people that are still just learning about what's happening around this effort. So I think we have to reiterate and share as much information out again as we possibly can, so that if we really do want community engagement in December, that people already have a pretty good understanding of where we are, what's been happening, and where in the timeline we're at. So I think the third video will help, but I still believe there's a lot of people that need to get caught up. And so if there's a way we could share out to the greater community the videos again, with maybe an update about the process. And is there any reason not to share the timeline with people, so people in the community know that the board is going to be meeting on this date to take recommendations from Patrick?
Yeah, we would be doing that anyway. We just sent out board highlights from the last meeting with upcoming meetings. And so what I'm thinking is either the week before or after Thanksgiving, at the beginning of the week, we could do it again. I mean, do we want to wait till like the Tuesday after Thanksgiving? Would people be more engageable, or do we want to do it like next Tuesday?
Yeah, I would say next Tuesday would be great.
Okay.
And that's before the holiday. And like I said, yeah, people have to get caught up. And there's a lot of catching up to do, I think. So yeah, that'd be great.
I think one thing is we're competing with bandwidth with a lot of things that are going on in the world. So at another time, we might have had more engagement or something. But yeah, no. So next Tuesday, Krista, Kim, and I can work together on what little write up to put with the 2 videos, but just put them out again on Front Porch Forum. And in Moncton, I also put it on Facebook because people tend to like to get stuff there. And then anywhere else that we think of putting that, we could ask, what we could do this time is ask the principals to maybe put it in their newsletter too, because I know a lot of parents get stuff that way. So maybe I could do that.
Yeah,
but I think that's most of the update, but I think that's a good idea. So next Tuesday, because they say don't put anything out on a Monday or Friday, right? And people ignore it. So I always think Tuesday is a good day.
Yeah, and maybe we could mention as well when that third video about when the options about what the options are that Patrick's going to be presenting or suggesting to the board, you know, when people can expect to see that. So then it will create the expectation that they're going to have, there is a third part. We want to make sure people are looking for it and are going to be, you know, have a foundation of understanding about how it got to that third video. Okay, so sorry, go ahead, Krista.
I wonder if it would be good to play around with a script without those recommendations, but just as placeholders, so that soon after that meeting, we can be ready to get the video out. I don't know.
Yeah, I can start. I mean, we've got almost a month. There's no problem with that.
Yeah, it might not be a bad idea to at least start tossing around some ideas.
Yeah, I will. I can start doing that this weekend.
Because then we could have something soon after his recommendations and maybe before we do some more engagement. And then I think if we could, I like the idea, Kim, of rebooting the conversation, you know, bringing this up to the forefront again for folks and sending something next Tuesday and maybe even again the Tuesday after Thanksgiving could be helpful. And Jennifer's got some great plug and, you know, send out ways of getting information to hosts of people. So she's really good at sending it out to all those channels.
Okay, I'll make a note. We can chat before next Tuesday.
Great.
I'll send an email. Kristen, I'll connect with you and then we can loop Kristen.
Thanks.
Okay.
Nancy?
It occurred to me that video 1 and 2 may have been made. I haven't kept the content in my head of both videos, but whether they may have been made before we got more positive information from the Department of Education about the FY22 budget. So maybe
that's included in there. And about the FY22, you mean the one after this year? The one upcoming or the second one?
The next year's budget, that is.
Right, so that.
All I'm, just a sec.
Oh, sorry.
All I'm saying is we just want to make sure that the information in videos 1 and 2 are still accurate because some of the information that we started with has changed.
So the only thing that's changed is that for per pupil students, we're held harmless this year, but then we have to pay for those next year. I mean, in the next budget. So
in the next budget, we're held harmless. It's the budget after that we're not held harmless, at least based on what the legislature is saying now. So
we're not held harmless, but we also have to pay the less students that it's sort of like you don't have to pay your increase this next budget, but you have to pay this increase and the following increase in the next budget.
At least that's what they're saying right now.
Right now.
Anyway, let's just make sure that the information that goes out is still accurate.
Okay.
Because the sands are shifting.
Yeah, and I think what we've been doing, what Kristen and Kim have done with the scripts is we usually loop Floyd, who I see here quietly observing, but we usually loop Floyd and Patrick in as well for any, you know, the finer detail around numbers. So if there's clarifications to be made or anything like that, then they can help with that too. Okay, so the next step is the survey. And I also want to say, and I think Kristen was talking about bandwidth earlier, I don't know about all of you guys, but I am so relieved we did not try to do the survey before the election. My own personal collective relief is huge for many reasons, but that is one of them. So I think I'm really glad we've shifted our timing. And I think feedback from this group and the board and Patrick and his team have helped to shape the questions a little bit more. And maybe Rob, I'll share my screen because not everybody can see it if I don't do that. And then I'll pull up the survey and we can just share with people where that's at. So hang on one moment while I try to figure out how to do that. Okay, so, and Rob, I'm just gonna scroll down a little bit. So the intro still has to be written. That's just what's gonna accompany the survey. Okay. Take it away, Rob.
All right. Sorry, I couldn't find how to unmute myself when I'm not on the screen.
Oh, yeah.
Don't do this every day. So like Krista said, we did decide to sort of postpone the survey. And originally the intent was to sort of pull on the coattails of an election and thinking that it'd be an election with a lot of engagement, that then we could leverage that. But at the same time, we weren't quite ready there with the language and sort of the scope and scale. And also with mailing all ballots, we were going to try to, again, put our survey in with maybe ballots, and that was outsourced outside of the state of Vermont. So just logistics there, that didn't work. So what you see sort of now is sort of a 30,000 foot view of the survey. And after Patrick makes his recommendations on December 7th, I believe maybe 3 or 4 options that he'll put forth. Those will also be inserted into the survey. So what Krista has up right now is again 30,000 foot view. It sort of starts out with sort of the 4, I guess, big picture buckets, if you will, talking about closing or merging schools, increasing taxes, reducing staff and programs, and then repurposing schools, which is something that the board could do if need be. And that does not take approval of voters of the electorate in towns. So the idea is to really get a good sense of sort of where people are at in regards to those 4 things, because they all sort of are connected to the options, or partially connected to the options that Patrick will put forth too. His options will be a little bit more specific. But so as you move down, and I can't speak to the science behind this like my wife can, but I'll try my best.
Actually, hey Rob, can I just interject real quick?
Of course.
So just to stay on this first section for a minute. So what we try to do is be specific without being so verbose that folks are going to get confused or overwhelmed by text they're not going to necessarily read, but to just sort of explain some important detail behind these buckets. And I want to point out one in particular, and Floyd, maybe you could talk a little bit about this, that we don't have the language quite yet, but we're trying to address the concern about the folks that do not pay based on that income sensitivity issue. And so, we're trying to figure out how to concisely and easily provide some context to this increase that would resonate with the majority of taxpayers. So Floyd, can you just share a little bit about what you and Patrick have talked about here?
Sure, happy to. In thinking about language about median income, tried to pick the median income for Addison County and how that impacted a $200,000 home, and then transfer it over to the income sensitized aspect of taxes, and what's that impact for someone who isn't paying taxes just based on what the vote is. And the estimates at this point are assuming the level playing field. It's roughly a 40 to 60% increase in taxes over 5 years, regardless of which one you use. Obviously a much lower number if you're income sensitized. I'm not sure if I'm answering all of your question, but just kind of giving you a flavor of how it impacts. Is that helpful?
Yeah, and I think, trying to provide some of that context here, and this is not finalized language yet, but I think what we're trying to get toward is fleshing out that impact a little bit more based on people's particular circumstances
I could
without.
call some numbers if that's helpful.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think I just want to explain for people,
Sure.
why this summary is as it is. And, we will be offering, like we have in the past, a calculator for folks to use to get a better picture of what things look like for them specifically. And there'll be links to other resources, but I think, it's important that we try to be fairly concise and clear in these descriptions. So,
And to some degree, simple. There you can go as deep into the weeds as you'd like, and we've used an income sensitive calculator in the past, but we've also within that linked to the state's calculator, which is pretty dang accurate to your own particular situation in terms of how to estimate what your taxes might be in that structure. So we've tried to be 10,000 feet, make it simple, but if you want more information, it's readily available.
great.
Krista,
Thank
Mike,
you.
can I just make a comment on that?
I'm
Krista,
sorry. I can't see who that is.
it's Mike Fisher.
Mike, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to just hold your comment so we can get through the survey, and then we can talk a little bit more about it after we go through. So Rob, if you want to.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Just about the vehicle, because it's sort of, from my mind, is, how are people going to see this? Is it going to be online, or is it going to be physical? And just so as you're going through this, I can envision how people are going to be getting the information.
Yeah, thanks. So both is our idea and our hope. We can probably turn around an electronic survey really quickly after Patrick makes his recommendations. And it will take a little longer to get the print version out. But Rob's wife, Meredith, was reminding us and suggesting that we not try to do everything right around the holidays. So the sooner it can go out, the better. So it might be like a staggered, electronic and then paper.
So
Okay.
sorry, would it be mailed to everybody in the 5 towns?
Yes.
So every person would get one in the mail.
Correct.
And then, but people could also go online.
Correct.
But we would hope they wouldn't do both.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Just thinking about what's happening right now. Trying to cover all the loopholes. Okay. Good.
Yep. Okay, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, great, thanks. We want to get as many responses as possible, so we're going to try to make it, to answer your question, Kim, try to get it out to everyone. I see this because this is happening after Patrick's recommendations, that this is really a survey for the board and this committee, but for really the board to get a good read at what we think the general consensus is. There might not be one amongst our 5-town community, but this is data that, at least I can only speak for myself, I can't speak for the board, that I'm really looking to see what people think. And we're going to attempt to have questions that not trip up isn't the right word, but try to suss out if everyone says one thing on one question, but then comes back and says something completely different on another. We'll have that data too to sort of chew on and look over as we move forward too, and considering if we put something on the ballot. So obviously, Patrick, admin, everyone can see the results, but this is really for the board and for the community to really give us some solid feedback in the next couple months. So that's another big picture thought that I had regarding the survey. So yeah, again, we're still at the 30,000 foot view without Patrick's recommendations in here, but big picture, the different scenarios or buckets as they've been called in the first question, sort of a scale, and then right below that, regarding closing, merging schools, increasing taxes. Again, not a ton of specifics there, just sort of big picture, and then putting them against each other. So just getting a sense of, you know, what people's breakpoints or thresholds really are. What really what cream really rises to the top is our hope with the way we set some of these up. In multiple conversations with Krista and my wife, we think it's important to ask folks, you know, regarding closing schools, like, you know, we don't want our town school to close, but it's okay maybe if Starkboro's school closed, and to see if folks, what folks say to that. Like, again, just we're trying to, another piece is just trying to put everything out there, all the options on the table, at least at the 30,000 foot view, because those other options that Patrick brings and we add to the survey, those are more concise, and they're not all sort of options on the table or the kitchen sink. So these are sort of where we're at the moment. Again, this isn't printed, so we're wide open to feedback and any other ideas and insight, but that's where we're moving forward there. The next question that Krista has highlighted, maybe Krista can speak to this a little bit more, but we're still really trying to wordsmith this. My wife Meredith would say this is sort of like a breakpoint question in thinking about you know, the financial implications of this. To what extent, you know, the board has always said, well, we're not going to exceed the threshold, but what if people give the nod to that? We don't know until we ask. And so that's what this question is sort of pointing to a little bit, in consideration with those buckets too.
Yep, and if I could just interject, the highlighting was just for our own reference, but we recognize that the wording is cumbersome. So we're trying to figure out a more clear way to say that, but I think Rob articulated really well what we're trying to get at here. And it is a really important question. Sorry, my cursor is not, I have to like poke my way down here, so it's taking me a while to scroll. Okay, do you want to keep going, Rob?
Yeah, so then this comes back to the values from last year's community engagement, and obviously Herb to start this meeting, and I've heard from other folks too, including on the folks on this committee, about the idea of sort of picking out your most important values, and it's not, we're not asking folks to rank them, we're asking folks to choose their top three. You know, that's sort of where we've sort of tried to find some sort of middle ground with, because if I would say, just thinking about Patrick's options, and as we go through the survey, if there's not a single response that people put town schools in their top three, that to me as a board member, the way I'd read that data is a pretty clear indicator that that's not a priority for folks that responded to our survey. And I understand, like, there's a lot to that, but I'm just, we didn't want to necessarily go with the ranking. We just thought we wanted to see what are the top three that thrive. So again, open to any feedback, any insight that you have. And then obviously we're going to have some open-ended folks to provide their own insight and input, and also some demographic questions at the end too. And as far as where Patrick's recommendations fall in, I think, Krista, we haven't quite sussed that out yet, how we're gonna put those in there. Am I correct in saying that? I don't remember us.
That's right. I don't know what Meredith would say, if it should follow a similar type of question format as the buckets. I'm not sure. So once we hear them, we'll have to get together and figure out how how to best to plug that in. So are you all set, Rob? Nope. Did we lose you? So I was just going to say, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see everybody, and I can put it back up if folks want. Yeah, I'm not sure if we lost Rob. So I was just going to say that I want to open it up to some comments, but I also want to invite, I don't want to spend more than maybe 10 minutes on this piece, because I want to make sure we talk about what we think is most important to accomplish with community engagement in December. But what I would say that is, if you have comments and you don't get a chance to share them or share them as well as you want to, please email me after the meeting, because we'd like to hear them. I just want to make sure we don't get too bogged down. So yeah, so anybody have any thoughts or questions? Go ahead, Deirdre. Oh, yep, go ahead, Deirdre.
Thank you, Rob and Krista. I know that creating that just is like a jungle of thought process. So thank you. I have 3 recommendations. And one is in that one of the boxes was talking about an option about reduced staff and programming was one of the things you can rank, I believe. And I would just strongly encourage pulling that apart some more. I think it's really important to get more specific information, reducing administration as one, reducing teachers, right? I think that to me is a very different piece, because my understanding right now is that administrators are working hard and doing good work, but there are about 26 administrative positions. And I don't mean principals, I mean people who are doing work supporting teachers, but are not directly working with students. And so that's something I really want us to think about. I think those people are smart, creative, good people, but I really want us to explore that. Can we sustain that level of administrative work as we're thinking about closing schools very seriously? So I would just encourage us to pull that piece out. Program versus reducing program, reducing administration versus administration, reducing teachers. And then I would also, I'm really curious if this idea of we're really putting a vote to community members in March, would you like to see specific financial numbers for all scenarios before you vote on a scenario? That seems like a really important one. I don't have those numbers. I know some board have said we haven't been able to get that, but I feel like even a yes or no would seem really important to me as a board member to know that. And I've got one more. I would love to, this idea, I think, Kristen, you said this idea, I love it. Competing with bandwidth, I think, is a lovely phrase that feels like we all can exhale as we experience that right now with pandemic and so many moving pieces in the world. And so I would love to see just a simple question about, would you like the district to pause on putting a vote in March? And I think if a whole lot of people say, no way, now we need to do this, that's useful. It doesn't mean the board is bound by that question, but I would love to see where our community is with that particular question. So those are 3 thoughts that I have that I I think would be really interesting information to gather. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
So thank you guys for your work on this. I know it's been a lot of effort, and to what somebody else said earlier, the grounds are shifting, and that makes it even harder. I guess well, first off, I want to very much echo or attach myself to the points that Deirdre just made. I think those are really important. Thank you for thinking that through, Deirdre. I had a few more specific points that I won't ask you to put it back up in front, and I'll put the draft survey in front of us. I'll try and make them on a higher level than specific, but Krista, I appreciate the challenge that you spoke to about being accurate and not too verbose. And I guess I want to just say as clearly as I can, I think you have a choice either you can't simply describe school financing and how it will affect different populations in a few bullets. You just can't do it. And so you're going to be stuck with either saying this will, click on this link to go see how this will impact you, or something like that, or a high level statement that it will increase taxes to varying degrees depending on family dynamics. And I thank you very much for working to add in the way that 2/3 of us pay our taxes, and not just using the methodology that 1/3 of us use. But I think it's very complex. So I appreciate the challenge you have. And then I also want to say that I wanted to caution us about the narrative that the choice is between laying off teachers and closing schools, because I believe the decision to close schools is a decision to lay off teachers. And I think that we really need to understand that. But I think in one of the questions, there was sort of this, like, do you want to close schools or lay off teachers? I'd have to see it again to see it more accurately. And I just want to say, I suspect the decision to close schools is a decision to lay off teachers. It's a way to lay off teachers, actually. And then, I had one, Rob, I wanted to, I felt a little bit challenged by the pick 3, and I was sort of thinking, like, how would I fill that out if I thought, socially, emotionally stable kids was linked to having community schools? And how would you understand me if I said, hey, emotionally stable kids is a really important value to me? You would know that it's going to be hard to interpret, I guess, is what I really want to say. And it's going to be, having spent a decent amount of time doing surveys myself and trying to understand just what people meant when they answered them. I guess I just wanted to flag that as a recognizing, at the end of the day, you're going to get a bunch of results and you're going to kind of go, huh? What does that mean? And at the end of the day, you're still going to have to make the hard choices.
Krista, I hate to interrupt. I have lost internet, the ability to access my computer. If somebody can type some stuff while they're going, I'm going to try to catch up, but I just wondered if somebody could help me catch up at this point.
I saw Liz give a thumbs up.
Okay, so if she can, and when I get back in, I'll forward it on to her and we can meld them together. That'd be great. I'm frantically trying to handwrite everything.
Okay. I see Kristen's hand up, so I'm going to give us 5 more minutes for comments. And I'd love to hear from, yep, no, you go ahead, but I want to make sure to hear from the committee members. I appreciate the public comment, but I also want to hear from the folks that are on the committee. So go ahead, Kristen. Oops, did you freeze? I think she might have froze. So while we're waiting for her to get unlocked, does anybody else? Mary, go ahead.
I totally agree with what you just said, Mike, about the values. I think that is essential.
Kristen, hang on one second. You were muted, or you're frozen. So Mary's going to go, and then I'll come back to you. I'm going to come back to you, Kristen. Hang on one second.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead, Mary.
I think it's essential information for us to get, but I definitely think that that's going to be more of a cluster craziness than it's going to be helpful. So then that made me think, is there a way for us to access this so we can, I don't know, try and figure out how to make it more useful, or try and figure out is there a way for us to access this draft and then think about it?
I'm happy to share out after this meeting. If you guys want to do some wordsmithing, go ahead.
Yeah, and it's not even wordsmithing. I don't even know. It's yeah, it's deeper than that.
Massaging,
Yeah, blah blah blah, whatever it is. Yeah, yeah.
That's almost a better way to get feedback, I think, because it is hard. Like I'm trying to remember everything I saw. I
Yep.
took notes as it went through,
Mhm.
but yeah, to have a copy and then sit down and be able to go through it and then send some feedback to you and Rob would
Actually,
be
that
awesome.
reminded me, it is on the updated agenda. There's a link. It's like hyperlinked under the word update. So if you have the agenda, you can see it there. And
Okay.
it will also be in the minutes.
Great,
But
thank
if you
you.
can't find it, let me know.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, Kristen.
Sorry
Go
about
ahead.
that. So I think what we're doing goes along with the budget presentation, right? So, and we're going to be promoting the budget presentation and information as much as we are this, because in the budget highlights from our last meeting, there's a lot of very pertinent upcoming financial information. And so I think we have to keep, so the first two videos told some about the financial story, right? And so now we've got some more pieces of that, you know, such as the Mount Abe roof needs to be fixed and other things. And, you know, so I think we have to do it at the same time. And I don't know, you know, how we do that, but I think that's important too, because that's more financial information, which is important as people are considering things, I think also. So those are going to be happening at the same time. And we're going to try to be promoting both of those at the same time. And so I don't know how that's going to dovetail, but it has to, I think, because that information is important for the process going forward. So maybe we can get clarification from Patrick about when the first budget meeting, and maybe it's going to be the same meeting as when he presents the things, because that's kind of how, that's the timeline we usually use for the budget. So I could ask him about his thoughts about that and get back to the committee about that.
Nancy?
I'd love to give feedback on the survey, and I bet everyone who's here has some things they might want to say about the specific parts of it. So I'm hoping we can find a way maybe to share a doc that we can comment, where we can comment on pieces, if that's a way that works. But the other thing I would say in relation to some of what I've seen in this draft is I'm hoping that it's possible to organize it so that people can answer some questions and not others. I wouldn't be able to answer the values question the way it's written. I'm not sure everyone would want to answer the income questions, although I understand why those are important. So I hope that it can be organized in such a way that people can still complete it if they can't complete all of it. But I would echo, I think breaking out staff and is going to be important. Some people, when some people hear the word staff, they automatically think that means everyone except administration. And so I'm not sure it will, you know, if we don't break it up, it'll give us the information that the board will need. But I also would echo what Mike said about the tax impact piece. I have some thoughts about how that could be structured, but also ringing in my mind is what Dave Sharp said at a recent board meeting, which was it's really unreliable to project beyond 2 years. And so telling people their taxes would go up 40% in 2025, 26, it just seems like an unreliable prediction. So I wonder if we can not go quite so far out and also explain what the assumptions are.
And I didn't hear from, I want to make sure to give Andrew and Liz a chance to respond or comment if they'd like. Not respond,
Sure.
comment.
Sure, a couple comments to what Mike said. Yeah, I mean, I think this is very difficult to convey this in a survey in a way that people can read, understand, and then appreciate the nuance and sophistication of the things that are before us. Knowing that if we close schools, we're going to be laying off staff. But I think part of what we're trying to understand is that if we don't close schools, we may be laying off even more staff. And what I'm starting to come to the realization of, especially hearing from my 10-year-old at school, is that as we if we decide to keep schools and the taxpayer says there's a cap, spending threshold aside, the cap is what the voters will pay for, right? That we're stretching staff, less and less staff over the same number of schools. And so, you know, my daughter has a half-time gym teacher, a half-time art teacher, a half-time music teacher, a half-time nurse, and half-time counselor, and we're on the third school counselor in the last 5 years. So I think what I'm becoming more concerned about are issues of equity. And do all the kids in Bristol have half-time folks, or do they have full-time folks? And that's my big concern, is just the issue of equity and how to, I guess, back to the survey, is how do we convey that in a way that doesn't overwhelm and swamp people, that they really have that nuance. So maybe that doesn't come out in the survey, just maybe that comes out in the continued conversations we have.
Thank you, Andrew. Liz, did you want to make a comment at this time?
Yes, I would echo what Andrew said. We were in a breakout room together during one of the town halls, and because another lens on that is the perspective of a teacher and how, you know, the support that they're able to get from the other staff that are in the school, and what breaks those provide and supports that provide for them to be able to teach the whole class. And so I'm concerned about the equity piece as well. And for the tax piece, I think that it is really complicated and people do pay on different levels. But I also think raising the taxes in a community means that, you know, it does get really complicated. It could mean even the cost of groceries going up. I mean, tax increases affect, you know, it's much more complicated than we could ever begin to put down here. So I think that's important to consider. At the last facilities feasibility committee, they had a long conversation about small schools versus micro schools versus large schools. And a lot of the data that they went over really reflected on how the numbers in our district, regardless of what configuration they were in, would still be considered small schools and would still be considered to have the benefits that small schools provide children and the whole. So that was a really great to listen to, I thought. So I think that's where I am on that. Thank you, Krista.
Thank you. So something that I'm reminded of is the important task this group has is to ensure just even the diversity of input here. This is a teeny tiny slice of our population, of our community. And I think our efforts are only as good as the people that we hear from. And the more we can get a really representative group of folks to understand in a clear way what's going on in our communities and offer their thoughts, the more the board can make decisions with some confidence that we're doing right by all of our owners. So I just want us to all keep thinking about that as we think about the big lift of engagement moving forward. So I'm going to pause us there, and we're still a couple minutes behind where I thought we might be for our agenda. But I did see that Kevin joined us. And Kevin, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot, I think this group might appreciate a quick update from you on your committee's work. And then I'd like us to talk about, just get some ideas out for our engagement for December.
Thank you. Sure. I apologize for stepping in late. I apparently am still struggling with a time change. So we met beginning of the month, the 2nd, if you will, and we covered a lot of ground. We had a meeting that lasted 3.5 hours, and we pretty much went through the final issues that we've been contemplating and working on. We ended up having a discussion with the 3 essential questions that we've been looked at to provide input to. And as Liz sort of alluded to, one of those questions ended up with a lot of debate on what the impact to kids essentially would be, what the impact would be if there's a school or not a school in their town. That question started out to be a lot of comparisons, as noted, between town schools, small schools, large schools, and consolidation options. And that question eventually got turned around to really focusing on what's the impact on the kid once they step out the door of their house in the morning of where they're going to go to school. So that question ended up a lot of conversation and with a whole different set of values, if you will, rather than what the group had comprised before. We reviewed the option matrices. That option matrix has become very complicated and confusing, and I think it's nothing more than a great alignment to the issue at hand. But nonetheless, the community and board members did their best to fill it out, and we quickly went over it because it's basically a summarization of inputs and then a conversion of those inputs into a red, white, green sort of chart that shows you where the strengths and concerns are, even though there's some anomalies in it. And then we ended up coming to a discussion of which choice in each of the 3 buckets, if you will, the 3 buckets being operate all schools, make changes to schools, the brick and mortar option of making changes to different campuses, or a potential partnership, and the partnership is with Addison Northwest. So we had some differences in the input from the board members that were there. One member had to leave early, so it was 3 of us that were left that ended up answering that final question. But we very easily came to a consensus and chose 3 options that we are going to pass on to Patrick for his input. We're pretty much done our work as far as the charge is concerned. We've got 1 meeting planned for the 18th of this month, which is a pretty quick turnaround. It's 2 weeks. At that meeting, we will take the 1 charge question that we radically changed and just do 1 more sanity check on it, which there was some homework that was supposed to be due this past weekend, which nobody issued any sort of concerns with it. So I don't expect that to be as a lively conversation, if you will, as it was before. And then the other thing that we will be doing at that 18th meeting is reviewing and modifying, wordsmithing, finalizing, and hopefully adopting a report out for for our groups or our committees' activities. And at that point, we probably will be complete with our charge.
Thank you, Kevin. So do you want to take a minute or two to field any questions about that process?
Sure.
Does anybody have any questions for Kevin?
I had a question. Kevin, when you guys were looking at each building or each scenario, did you include maintenance needs of those buildings in the near and farther future?
When we set up, when the matrix was set up, there was 3 cost categories. One was operation minus facilities. One category was facilities operations, and the third was capital concerns or needs. And cost over the length of the conversation of this board has been difficult, I guess you could say, in the sense that there are people that struggle with that, understanding the difference of that. I come from a facilities background, so it didn't seem like a big deal to me. And we do have an architect on the committee as well, and he doesn't seem to be a big deal with him. But some of the other people have different professions and different understandings of things. So there are people that we ended up in that category getting 3 out of 4 people responding, because some people would respond, didn't respond because they didn't have enough confidence in their responses to do that. So I mean, that's acceptable and it's understandable. The intent was never at the level we were operating at is to hone in on dollars and cents. The rough order of magnitude would be, stuff that's been presented by Patrick in the past, input from him in a very broad basis, or whatever personal experiences would have been.
So we don't know for each building what repairs are needed in the near and long-term future. We don't know that.
If you go back to the NESDEC report, which again is very superficial.
Right, it wasn't in there. It wasn't in there.
They didn't identify much of anything.
Right.
Joel
Go ahead, Kevin.
Joel has a multi-year plan for capital for buildings, so you can
Right, I did see that. I did see that, but my question was, did you put that into consideration in your into your considerations, that information? I'm just curious.
Not specifically, no. So
Okay,
it would be,
thanks.
It would be what would have been gleaned through public meetings if anybody picked up on it.
Okay, that's surprising to me, but thank you.
Go ahead, Sally.
Regarding this same question, it seems like I heard recently that, and I'm not sure where it was exactly, I think it was through school things, but the 5 elementary schools I heard were in pretty good shape, and it's actually the Mount A building that is needing the most work. Would you say that's true?
That's where a lot of the discussion is, and some of that could be by the size of the buildings. Mount A, obviously, it's the largest campus of any of the schools, so there's an inherent additional cost to operate that building. I think that could very well be true from the sense that most of the 5 elementary schools have been renovated more recently than Mount A, and quite often when you renovate, you're taking care of other things in the other parts of the building.
Well, the list we were given last year it went out, I forget, it was 3 or 4 years for each school, and there was quite a large amount of stuff that needed to be done for each school. I mean, I could try to get that again.
Yeah.
But just for maintenance and driveways and whatever. And so each school had significant costs that people were expecting, which is largely maintenance for those kind of buildings. But anyway, I could try to get that and send it to everybody.
Yeah, that you can. Now that list, well, there, a lot of the stuff I recall on that list is operational upgrades such as security and energy management and that sort of thing. You know, the whole concept of roof and electrical system that Patrick brought up at the last board meeting, I don't believe is on that list, or wasn't on that list last time it was reviewed as far as a monitoring report. So they are live documents and they change periodically.
Sarah?
Yeah, I kind of just want to echo Kristen and Sally a bit and just ask Kevin, do you feel confident in the choices that your subcommittee voted on, given that you didn't consider any of the financial of the district, given that this is pretty much a financially driven process that we're going through, looking at the facilities?
You can banter that back and forth all day long, but a lot of the stuff that we also included on that matrix were some, you know, we had on that matrix the, I don't know, 10 or 11 essential questions, or not essential questions, but the community values, which is the bulk of the active or the things that were chosen to talk about. And then there was the essential questions that were regarded about town schools and the impact of closure and that sort of thing. I think based on the conversations that we've had with Patrick informally, and particularly with guidance from an architect on the committee, and people should be understanding, and it's quite simply, you know, if you can compare this to houses. If you've got 6 houses and you decide you want to get rid of 1 house and operate 5, you're going to save some money, you know. And over, Patrick has said, you know, about 25 to 30% of the budget is for the facilities. The other 70, 60, you know, 70% or 75% is for the operation of the buildings or the staffing to operate those buildings. So, you know, the whole concept of reduction because of that is one component. The other component is how you staff them, or how you staff in a more efficient manner.
Rob?
Yeah, Kevin, I had a chance to look at the matrices or the matrices that each committee member filled out. And I didn't get a chance to go through the entire marathon of your meeting on Neat TV, but I tried a little bit. And there were pluses next to minuses in a lot of those boxes. And I guess how do you square that into then a number, and then a number that relates to a color? I was really trying to follow it, and it just seemed really challenging to follow. And how did you parse apart subjectivity from objectivity when you put a number to a box that had a plus and a minus?
So you're right. A lot of the boxes, depending on the perspective of the person, there was a wide range of observations or comments or feelings about how that would be. And some boxes had pluses and minuses and zeros in them. When I did the colored matrix, the red, white, and green matrix, I assigned a value of 0 to any minus, a 5 to any neutral, and a 10 to any plus, and added those up mathematically and divided them by the responses. And you know, it's all, then granted, it's all perspective, but you know, as it all melds from different viewpoints on the board, that is the average. There are not anomalies on that chart too, I feel, based on how people saw questions or interpreted them and made a response. So is it perfect? No, but there is a good direction. When you have all four people putting in pluses, and you notice on some of the squares, if you look at the values in the squares, you know, some of the squares are zeros and some of the squares are 10. And then there's this range of a little bit less than 5 is neutral, not quite neutral, and a little bit more than 5 is, well, that's going on the way of from neutral to positive is the way I look at it.
Okay, I'm going to move us on. Thank you, Kevin, for the update. And you will be sharing a summary, I believe, as well with the board and with Patrick, and that will be accessible to everybody.
Yeah, so the probably the main discussion at this meeting on the 18th will be, and the intent is to have it out obviously beforehand, so people can look at it. But it'll be a documentation of our process and inputs and findings, and that'll become the deliverable for our committee, I feel. So and it'll be public because it'll be discussed at the meeting, and then it will be there for the board and Patrick to refer to as they want to or need to.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we've got 17 minutes left, which isn't a lot of time. And I'd like to ask if people are willing to stay an extra 15 till 8:15. I'm not a fan of going over, but I want to make sure to at the very least get your brainstorm thinking around what we want to be sure we try to do with engagement before the January board meeting. So people give me another 15 minutes, perhaps. Okay. All right. So it sounds like, in my mind, what we've got happening is this recommendation from Patrick, which is going to come to the board on the 7th, and then we're going to spin out a video and soon after, hopefully, and then we're going to try to get our survey out at the end of January. So those are two vehicles for engaging the community. I'm imagining we might also want to do something like we did in October, which was to have opportunities for people to get together and talk through some of this information, to hear maybe a presentation about the options, and then to have some dialogue about them. But I'd like to hear from you guys what you think is most important as we work to ensure we're giving people, as many people as possible, a chance to learn more about these options and to to ask questions and to share their feedback.
I'd like to, because I've been thinking about this, and some of the things people have said here tonight is about questions that people have and where do they go. And I'm wondering about having some kind of an online chat, not a chat room, but like an FAQ where people can post questions, and then somebody from the appropriate committee, whether it's the feasibility committee or it's somebody from the board or it's Patrick, would go on to answer that question. And all of those questions would be listed maybe on the community engagement website. So people can go and somebody's got a specific question, they put it up there. We'd have to try to get it answered within, a reasonable amount of time, 24, 48 hours. And then eventually, as a lot of community questions come in, you can start to put them in categories so that it would be easy for people to find questions and answers, in addition to some of these other things that we're talking about, because I don't think we can over engage the community at this point. So that's just something we haven't done. And I think it's a great way to make sure the questions people might have, And they can also do it without attending a Zoom meeting. I just think a lot of the people we want to engage aren't the kind of people that are going to sit in a 2-hour Zoom meeting and go into small chat rooms. And, you know, a lot of us can do that, but there's a huge percentage of people in our 5 towns that would never do that. But they might have a question, and their neighbor or friend or relative could post the question for them and get it answered that way. So I'd love to see us do something like that.
And we have a model of that already, because there was a COVID helpline that, like an email that went to like a live FAQ, I believe, or the live part I'm not sure about, but that was put in place leading up to and within the first few weeks of school reopening. What's other thumbs up if you think that's something that we should consider doing? Okay.
I just want to add to that. And sometimes that can be really laborious. If someone has to like write out responses, they could just say the responses and then post the recording. You can do that just as easily, and someone could just hit, you know what I mean? Whether it's an audio or video, you know, then you don't have to like
That's
write
fancy.
it out. Someone doesn't have to, I know, golly. So yeah, you could try that. That'd be way easier for someone for Patrick to just respond.
I was just going to say, one thing to say is, what's the point of the answers might be really important to clarify as a committee, right? Because I don't think the answers are just simply the answer is blue, right? I think the answers are quite nuanced, and my guess is different parts of this committee and the board would answer it really, really differently. So I think it might be worth talking tonight or some point, like how questions are answered. I've had this experience emailing the board in the last month that I got pretty different answers from different board members. So who answers it and what's the point of the answer seems really important to figure that out, because that's going to really change if people put questions in and every suggestion is sort of one side of the conversation, whatever side that might be. That's going to shut down the conversation. Where if the answers are open and reflective, and I wondered about that, and we haven't thought of that, or, you know, I just think that how you answer will change the tone of the engagement within a week, because people will talk about that. Wow, this is so useful. Let's do it. Or, you know, we put the last 10 questions up and every idea was shot down. I'm sort of being extreme just to make the point. So I think that's really worth considering.
I see Steve Rooney, who's one of our board members who's been listening, and I see he has an electronic hand. So go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I just want to remind people that when they ask the board a question, they're asking 12 or 13 people. I forget, we might have an empty seat. They're asking an opinion of 12 or 13 people. And the board is obligated to answer as a single body. And that just presents some challenges. That's the only point I want to make.
Nancy?
I don't know if this is, I just have to, this is just on my mind and I'm wondering about it. So I have to say it. And I guess I'll ask you, Krista, do you think that the board is seriously considering putting a decision on pause for a whole host of reasons, some of which might be not enough information, the timing related to COVID, those sorts of things? Do you think that the board sees putting a decision on pause as a real option?
So I can't speak for the whole board, but I imagine that when we hear Patrick's recommendations, we're going to have a lot of questions and things to think about. And, you know, like I was saying earlier with budget increases, for example, you know, sometimes we don't take those recommendations and sometimes we do. And so I think, you know, I think the process is going to play out with all of the different input we get. And different board members bringing those different concerns to the table, and then the group deciding what makes the most sense.
Thanks.
You're lit up, Mary. I assume you might want to say something.
Does it light up when I touch? Oh my God, that's fascinating.
Sometimes
I
even if you
actually
breathe heavy, it lights up. So
I was just thinking, and it's probably just the dumbest question, but how is the process when you're taking a vote on those things? Is it literally just majority done? Is that really how you decide? Like there's
yeah,
probably
I mean, so
and then-
someone will put a motion on the table. In order to vote on anything, it has to be a motion. And then someone has to second that motion, and then it's open for discussion.
Right.
And then until somebody calls the question or we all feel the discussion is concluded, we don't vote. And then we do. And then,
and it's just majority check.
Yeah.
Cool.
If I could just add, anything that we decide, you guys can vote down. So whatever we decide is what we decide. And I think people are like, oh my God, what are they going to decide? It doesn't matter. Everyone can say no. And then that's happened before. And then we go back to the drawing board. So everyone breathe, because even whatever we come out with, it's okay. And people can say no. And then again, we go back. So it's okay.
It's true that the towns, if the school board were to vote to close some of the town schools, then the towns would have to vote to close those schools, correct?
We can't vote to close a school. We would
Okay.
be asking a town if they would vote to close their school.
Okay.
Yeah.
A specific town or towns, plural.
Whichever, whatever we decide to put on the ballot. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah, that's the question. Are we
Okay.
going to ask town XYZ to close? Are we going to ask no towns to close?
And then do you feel and I'll ask the school board members that are here, do you feel at that point that there needs to be community engagement in support of what the school board is putting before everybody?
We can't do that.
I mean,
we can just put out what we're putting out. We can't promote anything at all.
That's right. That's right.
We just put out the information.
Okay.
Such as the budget or whatever, and then people can ask us questions, but we can't promote anything. We just say, here it is, vote yes or no. That's what we can't promote anything or be political or anything.
Okay.
But I do think we would want to get information out after the vote is warned. Yeah. Sally?
I'm just
Oh,
thinking
sorry,
about
Kim.
this. Sorry, I'm just thinking about this a little bit deeper now. So if Patrick's coming back to the school board, again, on the timing, with recommendations, then we're looking for community engagement. So there will be specific recommendations at that point, right?
Well,
So
actually, what I think he's going to make a recommendation. He's going to say, here's some potential ways that we could create a plan for our district moving forward. This plan, pros, cons. This plan, pros, cons. This plan, pros, or however he's going to present it. And then he's going to say, this is the one I recommend we do based on my experience and the information that we've gathered. And then the board's going to have to decide if we agree with, well, then we're going to go to the community to see how they.
So the interesting thing, and again, being a member of this committee, is that if one of those recommendations is to close 2 of the schools, and then we're going to go to the community, those 2 communities will probably have a lot more to say about that recommendation, and then the community engagement becomes a little bit of a different scenario. So I think we have to be thoughtful about just how what the expectation is, and that how the information is going to be imparted and answered, which is why I don't like that question on the survey about, do you think another town school should close? But I'll send that as a follow-up, because that, that in my mind can create just a really, I don't know. I don't like any of that. And I think that we have to think about what we're asking, how we're asking the community to engage. Obviously, the survey is going to provide some feedback, but if we're going to do Zoom meetings or we're going to do questions and answers, what is the goal? What is the goal? Is it to provide as much information as we can so people can make a good choice on the survey? Is it so that the school board can be sure that they're informing the 5 towns as best they can about all of the situations? So, I think this community engagement needs to have a little bit higher priority goals, because it feels a little bit fuzzy to me. And in order to think about how we're going to do that, I think we have to be really clear about what the goals of that are. Is anybody else feeling that, or is that just me?
Well, I keep thinking about what you said earlier, Kim, that you've discovered in your town that lots of people didn't even know there was an issue. And that just makes me think, oh my, there's more work to do. And it's explaining over and over as we get more information about what is happening. For some people, no matter what the recommendation is from Patrick, it's going to be quite a shock because they haven't been able to pay attention right now.
Which makes me think maybe we need to do more engagement now, and think about ways of getting information out. And I think that, these conversations with the select boards are happening, but I'm not sure people in the 5 towns knew they were happening, and that's probably something that we could have done a better job, informing our towns that this was part of the process, which is why I'm thinking this timeline is really important to share out, not ask people to come and look for it, but I think we have to share it out in a way that's, here it is, here's what we're working up against, as opposed to come and look at this web page to get the information. And I think that kind of communication, we need to push it into the community and not just have a receptacle for it, and hope that people will come and find it.
Sally?
I was thinking that the main goal of the Community Engagement Committee was to build trust with the community. And so I think that whatever we do and whatever is put out and all that should really be going toward building trust, so that, just throwing something out there and, they can, vote it down if they want. But I think we want to make sure we're building trust and not putting out something that they need to vote down because they didn't have enough information or something like that. I just think that's something to keep in mind. It's our main goal is to help build a good conversation between the community and keep learning how to build our trust. Or build the board trust, or, build that connection is like the number one goal, it feels like to me.
I'll be going to the dump with the survey to try to catch people there, even if it's cold.
Great.
Stuff like that. Reach out, mean, it's harder at schools now. We're not supposed to be at schools, but we could be at the dump. So I'm going to do that.
And I think, Sally, that's a really good point. I think that the element of surprise is not going to build trust. So, you know, again, I am pushing for us to put out as much information as we can, even though it's hard conversations and even though it's information people don't like and they want to hear about it. We have to make sure that we're providing as much information as we can and engaging people in a meaningful way. That's, you know, I hear a lot of people talking about transparency and making sure that this is a transparent process. So, and that I think helps to build community trust, because people said we're doing everything we can to make sure people have accurate information, all the information, and that they're bending over backwards to make sure everybody knows about what's going on.
I would just say at first, I really appreciate you being on this committee, Kim, because of your background in marketing and communication and helping us to really structure that effort. And I just want to remind folks that, you know, in some big districts, they have a PR and marketing person or team, and we don't have that here. And so my hope is that regardless of where we're all coming from and what we might be advocating for in our own communities, I would just ask that through the work of this committee, that you also help to share information so we are as transparent as we can be, and to let folks know that we are, you know, that this small group of people, and mostly just a few members of this small group of people, are trying to do this as best we can, and it is very imperfect. Just like imploring all of you to help with getting accurate information out so people can really understand what's going on as they try to figure out what they might want to support or not support. Mike, go ahead.
I guess just to say the sort of statement, the obvious, it's sort of been hinted around, or maybe to say, you know, in the best of times and regular times, it's really hard to get people to engage. Most people are busy putting food on the table, getting to work, feeding their kids, taking care of the stuff that's in front of them. And but today, I don't know about you, but I'm wondering if I'm going to be able to see my parents. You know, I mean, there's big stuff in front of us right now. And so I applaud, I agree with Kim. I think you're right. You need to, you know, the committee and the board needs to redouble the efforts to engage the community in this. And I also am afraid that you are battling an uphill, you know, a headwind that is so giant. This is just a very, very hard time to ask anybody to take anything else in. So I wanted to say that out loud, and it goes to the comment. I'll just say it. I think it's the wrong time to be asking the community to think about this stuff. You've heard me say that before. Then I also wanted to say, just as clearly as I can, as one community member, I am just as opposed to closing the New Haven school as I am closing the Lincoln school. Of course, I have a special connection to my school. My kids went there, to the Lincoln school. My kids went there. But in terms of my values, in terms of my advocacy here, I also had a hard time with that frame of maybe defining someone like me as only trying to protect my own. So I just wanted to say that out loud.
If I could add just one quick thing, looking at all the budget stuff for when I'm sitting here in the seat next year, when we have to create next year's budget, I am terrified. And I'll just say that I am truly terrified. You've had to look at budgets, Mike. I just got a chill saying that.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to end with that.
Yeah, Chris, if I could respond, I totally appreciate, you guys there's no good choices here. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to make it sound like things are easy. I'm being an advocate on one side of something. Yeah, this is a very, very tough dynamic. One that I think, by the way, that there's a lot of communities are in the same boat, and I'll say I want to work with those communities to try and push the legislature to take action quickly. The high spending threshold is going to affect every single community in the state if it's untouched. But Kristen, I appreciate that. You're right. This is really tough, and there's no good choices here. You're right.
You know, and I think what is important for the community to hear is that grave concern folks have about losing their town school, and also the grave concern that Patrick and his team have about what our schools might look like if we don't do some things differently. Because I think it's fair for us to just hear all of the things we're all holding and find a way to, I don't know, to just acknowledge that it really sucks.
I think,
Mary?
but Rob, I feel like you had your hand up a long time ago.
Oh, sorry. Rob?
No, I mean, it was more of a logistics question around, and I don't know the answer to this with Patrick's recommendations, but is he going to, I guess, point out specific schools to close? Because I think that would also, folks said.
I think that's my understanding. Yeah.
Okay. I need to chew on that.
Nancy?
So in terms of our task tonight in the next 7 minutes, I do think that Kim's idea of finding a way very soon to put in a form that's easily understandable to people who haven't been in this conversation, what this timeline is between now and January 26th. And also that's part of it. And the other part of that is if whoever is reading that, if they have opinions or messages that they want to get to the board, how can they do that? If they have something to say about it, if they have time and to do that, how to do that so that we're giving that, so we're being transparent and we're inviting their best ideas. So that's a piece, I think, of what has to happen really soon.
And I think it goes back to what the goal of the engagement is at this point is, you know, we're not really looking for input, are we? Is the board looking for input from the community, or are we looking to inform the community of the process?
Well, which engagement are you talking about?
Well, our next big push, and when we, you know, up to when the video comes out, and then the survey.
So what I think I heard earlier was that we wanted to send out at least 2 messages to folks that let them know or remind them, okay, we have this timeline, and here's the videos that we've put out. So that we were going to do that twice, and then we were going to see about getting an email that people can address questions or comments to. That's the first thing. And then I think we were talking about the engagement after the recommendation, and that one is going to need more thought. What is the purpose? How is that going to look? Mary.
Right, okay, yeah.
Just really quickly, so are school leaders talking about this in schools? Like, is this a conversation? Is that why people don't even know about it? I'm just picturing like principals know how to get information to their students about COVID related stuff. So how is there still a huge lack of information? And in that way, can you use
I
that?
think so. Like, I know that I got maybe 3 or 4 different emails from Jennifer based on different groups I belong to when we send something out. So one is like as a Bristol parent, one's as a Mount Abe parent, and one as through the board.
About
you know,
that.
and then there's the stuff on print about this work. Yeah. So
There was
there's lots of channels,
there was
but you can never do it enough.
There's a thing in the newspaper too. I mean, it's just people having other interests and I mean, I think we're putting a lot out there and getting an email from your kid's school. I mean, that's just people in the school community. But I mean, we've been putting these out on lots of channels and like Mike said, it's hard to engage people when until the vote sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm wondering, because we've got 2 minutes left from our extended time deadline, is you know, our next meeting is not scheduled until the 8th, but I think it makes sense to connect with Sue around planning for the, you know, the bigger questions are around the engagement after Patrick makes his recommendations, and schedule a meeting with her and whomever from this committee would like to be part of the conversations for planning specifically after Patrick makes his recommendations, what sort of engagement we might have. And so I'm just going to ask if you'd like to be part of that, to please let me know. Just shoot me an email and I'll see what we can get on the schedule outside of our, I'll call another meeting. Anybody who's available can come, but if you specifically want to be part of that planning.
Krista, can you just send a doodle poll to us and based on what you can
So
do?
once folks let me know, please make sure I'm part of that, then I can do a doodle poll based on Sue's schedule and see what works for the most of us. Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand.
So I will do a doodle poll once I know, or I could just do it for this whole committee. But I'll wait to hear from Sue when she's available.
Oh,
I
okay.
think this is where her expertise is really helpful, is in facilitating these kinds of community conversations around hard stuff. So I'll get dates from her, and then maybe I'll leave it that way. And then you can fill out the doodle poll, and who's ever available, we can get together again.
Okay.
There were a couple other things I wanted to say. Oh, okay. The one thing I did want to say is thank you to Mike and Sue and Deirdre and whomever else is on. It's tricky to have input during a work meeting, and I think this went really well, and I really appreciated you being here. So thank you for coming, and for all the folks that are not normally on this committee, thanks, and appreciate everybody for being part of this conversation. I think before we adjourn, I'd like to just quick check in on how, if anyone has any things they felt like went well or didn't go well, or we should maybe try to do differently next time. Thumbs up. Okay, thumbs up if we're in good shape. Okay, all right. And then any last public comment before we adjourn?
Thank you.
Okay, so I will take a motion to adjourn from the board member, please.
I motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Andrew. And can I have a second?
I'll second. Sorry, Rob.
That's okay, Rob. Okay. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, so the meeting is concluding at 8:16. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Aye.
Thanks, Krista.
Good night.